every folks, and good morning. Welcome to a completely pointless tier list, but one that I thought was kind of fun. So recently I've been doing the whole job hunting thing, and well, basically, you occasionally see a bunch of quizzes pop up of like, here's like, how are you at leading this, that, or the other? You know, would you do better as a team lead or as a grunt or whatever else? And so to that end, this got me thinking, like, as far as our various kind of protagonists from various RPGs that we cover on this channel and whatnot, how would any of them actually stack up if we rated them based off of leadership qualities? Now, obviously, this is something that can vary quite a bit, and definitions will be all over the place, but I decided to go just kind of look up kind of characteristics of a good leader here, and roughly speaking, try to find the most neutral source I could on this whole thing, and just kind of rate everybody based off of that. So, there's one from, what was it, like a Center for Creative Leadership, who, according to Google, is fairly neutral on all things. If there is any kind of political drama or whatever else, I don't freaking know. Anyway, so, leadership stuff that this one came up with. So, 1, self-awareness, 2, respect, 3, compassion, 4, vision, 5, communication, 6, learning agility. This is actually the one of the ones that really made this particular list stand out to me, because it is one thing that you don't see on many of these other lists, because they're usually like, oh, just the ability to go get the job done. Well, no kidding, you vague... Anyway, let's see, 7, collaboration, 8, influence, 9, integrity, 10, courageousness, 11, gratitude, and 12, resilience. So, let's go ahead and get started. So, this is going to be a very randomly selected list, more or less, of stuff from all over the dang place. We're going to start off with ones I'm a bit more familiar with. There's a few that are in here that are just in here because people wanted them to be in here. Like, for example, personally, I had absolutely no idea that there was a Bomberman Tactics game at some point. Thank you, Warren, for letting me know. We'll try to cover that at some point. I don't know who looked at Bomberman was like, yeah, this needs to be an SRPG. That's hilarious. I want to look at it. It apparently only came out on Sega Saturn. No wonder we haven't heard of it. Anyway, let's go ahead and start off with that. So, let's see. I had known nothing about this character other than I've played a couple of Bombermans before, and basically it was just go bomb things. So, self-awareness, I mean, they name themselves after the one thing they do, so fair enough. 2, respect, probably not. 3, compassion, bombs. 4, vision, can't really see beyond bombs. 5, communication, I mean, they know how to bombs. 6, learning agility, they know how to do more bombs, so we don't know if they're necessarily going out of their creative wheelhouse there. 7, collaboration, there was that one time that they went in the future and did that really futuristic Bomberman, so I guess they kind of get that one. 8, influence, we haven't even heard of this game, so no. 9, integrity, I mean, their whole thing is destroying integrity of anything around them, so probably not. 10, courage, yeah, I mean, if that's your only weapon, sure. 11, gratitude, they're probably thankful for gunpowder. And then 12, resilience, not really. They get one shot by their own weapon. That is the whole point of the game. In most of the other Bomberman games, again, I don't know how Bomberman Tactics works. It's still hilarious to me that that even exists. So I'm going to say initially odds better on a landmine for that particular one. I'm going to try to pick somebody for each of these tiers before we get going to introduce them. So first of all, F tier. Like, as far as these guys, these are the ones that are probably going to get you in far more danger than your actual odds of ever succeeding. So, next is going to be D tier. So this is going to be a case where you're just a number to them. You're essentially just a line on a spreadsheet, and that is 100% initially where I want to put the commander of Xenonauts. So let's see, as far as self-awareness, I mean, everyone calls them by their title, so they're definitely aware of who they are. I know that's not what they mean. Anyway, respect, 0 respect for anybody. They have a scientist that basically lets, just like goes and puts a bunch of violent aliens that tear people to pieces next to the coffee maker, and nobody says a damn thing to stop that. Compassion, none. Vision, they can see until the next month's spreadsheet. 5, communication, you go out there, go kill thing. They really do not communicate very well, seemingly. Learning agility, they do get that one, because adaptability before you get completely overwhelmed is how you get anywhere in that game. Collaboration, kind of. They have a small team that they can kind of sort of work together with. Their scientist hates them, their engineer is just kind of happy doing his job. Everybody else just wishes that they weren't there, so I don't know necessarily if they're getting on that one. Influence, I don't feel like they're necessarily influencing much, they're just doing their job. Integrity, they are staying the course. Even when one of their funding countries betrays them, they do still stay the course, so I guess they got that. Courage, sure, but I also don't know if they have much of a choice. Gratitude, none. Resilience. I mean, we see possibly in Xenonauts 2, I think the general at the very start that gets mind controlled is the old Xenonauts commander from Xeno 1. So I'm assuming not terribly resilient if the situation actually demands anything from them. But they're decent enough at leading. The whole point is that everybody's terrible at their job in Xenonauts, aside from one scientist. So we're going to go ahead and put them there. Okay. Next up, let's see. We'll win, maybe not you specifically. I'm gonna say probably the commander from Silent Storm. Now, the squad leader from... not really commander, more squad leader there. But the squad leader is a custom created character, so I just kind of put a few Silent Storm characters in here. Technically, this is a couple of different games and their DLCs, so we're just kind of counting them all as one, because they are more or less the sort of classic, or, you know, 007 archetype, give or take. All the rest of the squad, they're more or less just gonna, like, they're there to help get the mission done. If anything happens to them, nobody cares. It's all about finding that next clue to get you to the next plot point, and or find some other way to capture the targets you need to capture. If the mission doesn't get done, there's really nothing else happening there. So either way, they're just a number. Well, they are just a number, but they do have a bit more personality. You kind of get the sense you probably want to care about these people a bit more, considering there's only a couple dozen of them to begin with. But yeah, we'll definitely win, just maybe not you specifically. If something happens, you're probably getting left behind. Now, let's see. Self-awareness. They do seem roughly self-aware of their kind of spot there. Respect. None. Compassion, none to a almost hilarious degree. Vision, I mean, only until the next clue, so probably not so much. Communication, they... no, I mean, they do communicate with their team, I guess. They don't really have anybody that disagrees with each other necessarily. We'll kind of leave that as a neutral. Learning agility, unless they're gaining levels really quick. Not really. They don't necessarily adapt as much as they just find clues and move on to the next clue. Collaboration, they're kind of a rogue agent for a lot of the different events in those games, so maybe not necessarily. Influence, not much. Integrity, not so much. Courage, definitely. They're just kind of running guns blazing in a lot of cases there. Gratitude, I don't feel like they have much, but again, as long as everybody gets out and they manage to get all their loot out of the map. And then finally, resilience. They are surprisingly durable, so there is that too. Okay. Well, I say surprisingly durable, and then you randomly just, like, get headshot through a staircase, and that's the end of that. Yeah, that game is weird to try an Iron Man run of. Okay, so I'm going to say, yeah, we'll win, but maybe not you specifically on that particular one. Like, they've got some stuff on here. They will work together with their soldiers. They've got some general self-awareness of who they are. They seem to try to keep everybody alive, but again, the mission always comes first in this case. Now, is that necessarily a bad thing as far as leadership in that context? Maybe not, because usually there's some kind of doomsday weapons that are being developed in those games. So, in those particular cases, yes, losing one person in the name of stopping that is probably what they want to be going for. So that probably goes towards sticking with integrity and resilience there. As far as learning agility, it feels like they absolutely don't learn their lesson as far as traps go, because they get ambushed a lot. So yeah, usually I personally read the situations in those games like they expect you at a certain point to be the one that like doesn't even try to do the conversation. You just immediately start chucking grenades at everything in the room. So there's that. Like, especially how you start Silent Storm Sentinels, it's just like, you can try to do that conversation, sure, but if you wait more than 3 seconds on that starting map, you're dead. Just full stop. You are completely dead. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue on here. Alright, next for the stubborn tier, I feel like this 100% is Magnus from Ogre Battle 64. Now, let's see. Self-awareness, yes, he is very aware of his role in the world, and it bugs him the entire time. Respect, he does seem to have respect for the people that deserve it. Oftentimes, though, this does mean that he'll end up being at odds with the people that he's supposed to be taking orders from, but quite simply can't bring himself to actually follow. Like, for example, when it comes to a lot of the division commanders that need him to go and execute certain people, he's like, no, they're actually good people, guys. I'm sorry, just no. Like, he's very stubborn in terms of he specifically wants to just do what Yuma wants him to do. He wants to try to get out of the shadow of the stuff that his dad allegedly did. And at the same time, he's not really one for necessarily negotiation and stuff like that. So for collaboration, that's kind of an interesting one. because he will go in and collaborate with the locals of different regions, talk with the people there, try to get them on his side. But when it comes to direct enemies and stuff like that, unless somebody approaches him on friendly terms first, he is not really going to be the first one to offer them a chance to stand down, at least as far as I recall. Now, when it comes to OB64, I haven't, played it a bajillion times like a lot of the other ones. It's only been, 3 or 4 times at this point. So there may be some examples that I'm missing there, but to me, he basically embodies this stubborn tier here. So let's go down the list. So yeah, self-awareness, respect, we got that. He does come off as respectful to most people, just not necessarily certain commanders. Again, just kind of entirely based off of whether or not they match his morality there. Compassion, yeah, he generally seems to fit that bill. Vision, he doesn't really seem to have much of a vision necessarily. He just sort of has a vague goal and marches towards it. Usually that's helping Yumel in whatever way seems obvious right now. Communication, I would say he probably gets this one. He does get legions and stuff like that later on, showing that he can lead 5 squads at once, so he's definitely got some communication down pat there. Learning agility, he does tend to pick up skills very quick. Again, going back to the legions, even though they're not a very useful mechanic, he does basically learn how to completely restructure his army over the course of a weekend. As far as changing classes, adapting on the fly, they seem to do a pretty good job of that. Collaboration, they usually try to work with the locals. They usually try to stop by with anybody that happens to be on at least somewhat decent terms. As far as influence goes, they're good at turning enemy places to their side. They don't have too many people that end up betraying them afterwards, so that's nice. As far as integrity, they're basically a brick wall of integrity, so that'll work there. There's only a couple of opportunities for him to really kind of go take a darker path, as it were, and even then he usually ends up still pulling it out in the end, as it were. He might lose Vice along the way, but that's kind of just... not Vice, what's his face? Why am I forgetting his name? The Vice for Ogre Battle 64. Why do I always forget his name? It's like friggin' Tactics Skywalker. What the hell with the ponytail? Why am I blanking on his... There we go. He's diametrically opposed. Honestly, you'd think I'd remember that at some point, but this is what, 7, 8, something like that, tier lists, where OB64 has come up, and I've just completely forgot the Diomedes exists, or rather, have completely forgotten his name. I remember his face, I just can never put a name to that face. It's the weirdest thing. I always just want to call him OB64 Vice. Alright, anyways, moving on. So, yeah, as far as gratitude, he does seem to... I know personally, I always feel like whenever you get a good character, they do well, you reward them with good items. I feel like that's almost put together by the game for that particular reason, because in a lot of cases, you don't necessarily need to give out particular items to make somebody viable. So oftentimes the equipment that they carry might just be based off of gratitude. So to me, design-wise, it feels like, lore, as per the lore and setting and whatever else, he probably would end up giving those better soldiers those better items. And then resilience, dude's built like an absolute truck. I know that's not the resilience they mean, but they're also, again, just hard-headed to the point that they don't really seem to have even the standard, RPG protagonist meltdowns and stuff like that as often. He has a couple of times that he freaks out at only the good guys. As soon as anybody on the bad guy side shows up, he's just a brick wall of just utter impenetrability. But as long as we got Destin showing up, as long as you got Warren in the room, he's just fully happy to throw a tantrum. I'm assuming he just knows his safe space. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue on. So, next, for the mission will get done at any cost, I feel like the sort of embodiment of this one is going to be Ramza from FFT. Now, his case is a bit different because unlike a lot of the other ones, when it comes to his ability to collaborate with people and whatnot, it's very different. So even somebody like, let's say, Denim from Tactics Ogre will oftentimes try to talk down everybody in the room before starting a fight with them. It's one of the things that, that ends up selling the kind of setting of that game. In Ramza's case, he can't engage with the politics game because the politics game is the problem. Literal frickin' demons came and introduced the world of politics in a never-ending death cycle to the setting, so he can't actually go down that route. Violence is the only option in his case. So to that end, his collaboration is more of a kind of a spy kind of angle on the whole thing, which is interesting. Anyways, so let's go down the list of characteristics. So, first of all, self-awareness. He does seem aware of his station everywhere past about chapter 1. He just becomes increasingly aware of that whole situation, which, by the way, a little bit of a side note, it bugs me so much that all of the kind of art and portraits and whatever else, aside from just going and pulling their in-game portrait, because I wanted something that kind of stuck out for everyone on this list, they're always of his chapter 1 outfit when he's completely, like, naive and out of his element and whatever else. It's always that stupid looking outfit. It's just like, I get, like, the spiky armor is iconic, that's the second most likely, but then the final one, once they've had their whole character arc, once they've gotten everything figured out, like the rune plate and booty pants, as I was kind of mentally called it, that one is just, for some reason, just never one of the ones that pops up. Weird, but anyways, let's go ahead and move on. So yeah, self-awareness, he seems to be very well aware. Respect, he does always seem very respectful of everyone he comes across. Compassion, does genuinely seem to care about everyone he comes across. A little bit too much in some cases, like let's say when he tries to revive a pet robot and accidentally murders his friend temporarily. Vision, that's questionable. He does have a general goal in mind as far as how to hopefully stop things. Like, he has a vague goal of, you gotta kill the demon things, but how the hell are you supposed to kill the supernatural entity you don't even understand? So he's roughly following a vague goal. He's trying to follow up on his clues as much as he can, so I would say it's a maybe on Vision. Communication, he mostly gets information across, I feel. Like, there's a few cases when he definitely needs to speak up a bit more, but in general, he does seem to try to get people on his side. He does seem to try to explain the whole class war situation to people, and frankly, nobody believes him because the situation is freaking nuts. So I'm going to say he probably does okay in communication, too. Learning agility, he does learn very quickly, especially if he got JP up, like, sweet Jesus, dude just threw 3 rocks and now he understands calculus. So they're definitely going up there for that. Collaboration, he doesn't carry a very big team with him, but he does, for example, get, what was his name, like, Orlin, I think was his... I'm trying to remember which one's which translation, but the Astromancer, he gets him on his side. He does get Orlando on his side. That's more Delita's thing, but still, he does try to collaborate with everybody he comes across. As far as influence goes, he has a lot more influence than he himself seems to believe, just due to more or less being medieval sword Batman for a while. Just sort of like showing up and suddenly deleting the politics, as it were, until we get to the end game and he's just running around through like abandoned castle after everyone died of demons. Like, man, can you imagine being in that setting? You're just, like, marching along, you've got this whole idea in mind over how you're going to totally whoop that guy's ass. You get over there, like, hey, great, everyone's dead, now what? Like, this wasn't part of the plan. I wasn't supposed to just show up to a ruin. Alright, integrity, almost to a fault. Like, dude never backs down. Let's see. Courage, again, same thing. Possibly a bit too much so in many cases. Gratitude does seem to be thankful. He's one of the few characters in this kind of just overall genre that makes it a point to always shake everyone's hand, so that's always been an appreciable thing. And resilience, I mean, like, yeah, if he decided to go monk with a, maybe some move HP up or something like that, he's probably doing alright. It's like Monk Knight, I remember, used to be one of my favorites growing up, just because it was hilarious to imagine that they're just marching along, just picking up somebody's sword and snapping it in their hands. Oh, man. That game's fun. I wish it held up a little better. I can't wait for the remake. But yeah, the systems are just so dang good in that one. God, that cutscene skip. It needs more cutscene skip, and it's annoying because it's like, you either have the original version on the PS1, and it's got the best sound effects, it's got the best just sound design in general, it plays comfortably on anything, no lag, no nothing, but then you can't skip the cutscenes, and then you got the mods, which introduce a bunch of different things, but then you're playing a mod. Oh, sorry. Like, you're then playing a mod. Like, I've had Cerebos mod with me for a while. But even then, like, you're playing a mod and whatnot, so you don't necessarily always get the cutscene skips, and even when you do, it's something different, whether it's holding down the X button, whether it's just removing them entirely, or whatever else. Or you get the like, let's say the PSP version, which doesn't have a cutscene skip, and also lags like crazy, and then you get the, actually, come to think of it, I forget if the Lion War had cutscene skip. I forgot to look into that. Need to look at that at some point, but again, still technically a mod. And then you have stuff like the mobile version, which is great. It's in your pants already, but then it's so jank in a lot of weirdly specific ways that it's just always kind of weird to play. But yeah, like, I still play it somewhat regularly, but it's just like it's so weirdly janky to have the menus randomly lag, but then the battle maps are too fast and the sound is all fucked. Anyway, so yeah, that's one of the downsides of something that has been ported so many times, that the original is just like barely holding on, like some kind of clone that has been cloned too many times. Anyway, so next, this is going to come as no shocker, but as far as like S tier for leadership, we're going to go ahead and put Denim up here for like just as a starting point. We've got 20 that we're putting on this list, just so you know. So as far as self-awareness, like that's a huge part of the plot. Just seeing them wrestle with the stuff that they've done is I would say a solid half the cutscenes. Respectability towards other people, yeah, they're always generally deferring to people's title, to people's humanity, whatever else. Compassion, usually there. You see a couple of cases where that's potentially thrown out the window, and even then, there's still the option to still be merciful to them anyway. Whenever there is somebody that just insists on fighting him because they have to, he still ends up apologizing to them afterwards. As far as vision goes, the beginning of the game, definitely not. Towards the kind of later parts of the game, it feels oftentimes like they're ahead of the player as far as knowing what the hell's going on, as far as having a general plan. And additionally, I want to point out, as far as communication goes, going back to that vision point, this dude is the most responsible one on this list by frickin' miles. Every time, like every other cutscene, that they're stopping in a castle, they're taking meetings, they're meeting with their spies, they're meeting with their advisors, they're constantly taking meetings. They're constantly sitting in on the daily goings-on, constantly putting in feedback, constantly bringing in the people that survived the war so far to put in their 2 cents. Like even when he's advised to go put up more of a front to play the political game better, he's still trying to kind of generally be straightforward about stuff. Like, again, as far as attending meetings and stuff like that, definitely on point as far as that goes. Learning agility, it takes them a bit of a while at first to come to terms with, you know, realities of wars and whatever else. Over time, they do end up picking up on things pretty darn quickly, eventually start dismantling things politically pretty darn quickly. So I would say as far as learning agility goes, yeah, that like considering the whole thing takes place over the course of about a year, they go through quite the transformation. Collaboration, they try to get along with pretty much everybody that they run into. Influence, by the end of it, they can more or less be considered the place's favorite king guy if everything goes well. He might have enough influence to put somebody else on the throne instead. And even then, his influence is so much that one of his endings involves him just leaving permanently, so that the person that he left in charge actually has a chance. As far as integrity goes, that's potentially up to the player in that particular one, because they can directly go out and commit war crimes. They can do absolute atrocities over the course of their fights, and then potentially go and criticize somebody for it the next day. So that's just kind of depending on playstyle. Canonically speaking, they seem to just be trying to end the war by any means necessary. So I'm going to say kind of neutral on that one. Courage, definitely got that covered. Gratitude, again, they're kind of like Ramza, one of the few that makes it a point to actually go shake people's hands. And resilience, like, that's... in lore, that's again one of their big defining features, is just being the sort of force of nature, as it were. Like towards the end of the game, by the time that they have an army, like everyone already knows before the fight even begins. Like they don't even put up a front. They're like, look, we're dying here. Like just hold these guys off as long as possible. All right, we're just gonna try to buy time. We're done here. Like we already know what's coming. Anyway, so let's go ahead and move on here. So next on the list is going to be Piper Faraday from SteamWorld Heist. Now, in their case, I would say probably they go under mission will get done at any cost. Technically speaking, I don't think they canonically lose anyone ever. So they definitely would sort of go through the carry you through a fire on their back category to some degree. But I would say they probably will just stick with the mission will get done at any cost, because they just sort of pick up the pieces of their crewmates and put them back together afterwards. They are reassemblable robots after all. So let's see. Self-awareness, I would say they're almost comically not self-aware in some cases. Respect, they don't have any respect towards the crown, but they do have respect to other pirates. Compassion, they do take on some oddballs, so I would say yes. Vision, their vision is, well, just to basically keep on taking bigger and bigger ships, so I guess kind of. Communication, they do stop and talk with all of their crew members after every engagement, which I guess we don't know necessarily canonically that they always do that, but considering all the text bubbles are there, you probably should. It's got some fun dialogue. Learning agility, probably not so much on that one. They do generally stick to the same strategies for most of the game there. They do get their level ups, they do get their new perks and stuff like that, but they don't necessarily learn too much that transforms them. They still know that, you know, they board a ship, they take all the loot, they take all the hats, and they leave everything else in pieces. Collaboration, they collaborate with their crew. They don't really team up with anybody else, so probably not. Influence, how much influence do they have? Basically none. Integrity, I mean, they're a pirate, so depends on if you're a pirate or not. Courage, yes. Gratitude, I mean, to the people that bring them loot anyway. And resilience, they can be rebuilt from parts, so you can't get more resilient than that. Okay, which actually, speaking of, next for the F tier, one that I just specifically gotta bring up every time because it's funny to me, whatever the hell his name was from Front Mission 3. You knew this was coming. So, to anyone that hasn't played Front Mission 3, it's got the most comically inept protagonist you'll ever see. Like, you'd think it was played for laughs, but they usually try to play it straight, and that's the funniest part. Because this guy is a complete lunatic in every possible degree. Like, just, somebody doesn't respond for 5 seconds, they're just attacking a military base. Like, they're sitting around at a hotel, well, our person hasn't gotten back yet, it's been, I don't know, like 10 minutes or something. They hop in their mech and start stomping around in the city streets. Like, just every possible opportunity, they just immediately go and smash the fly off the handle button. They've got a ridiculous temper, they've got almost nothing even-handed about them. Honestly, it's bizarre to me that the main cast even keeps this guy around, because he is just, like, he's a liability in every situation that they run into. It does work out, comically so, in his case, but it is really funny to me that this guy's kept around as a leader, no less. Like, he's not even an inspirational leader. I think they're just scared that he's gonna turn on them. So they're just terrified of his plot armor, I think. Anyway, so let's see. Self-awareness, he has none. Respect, he has none. I mean, ultimately, the closest he gets to respect is on one of the routes. He kind of ends up doing the female lead. And that's the closest he gets to respecting her authority as far his superior. Compassion. He has destruction. I don't know about compassion. Vision. Permanently red. Communication. He basically talks and screams more than half the time. Learning agility. He only learns how to kill faster. Collaboration. He'll work with whatever government happens to sponsor him on that particular route, but he's taking orders until he's just screaming to go kill stuff the rest of the time. He's probably the most canon berserker I've ever seen, and he's got no physical prowess to back it up. He just pilots a robot. Influence, somehow extremely high. I don't know why people follow this guy. They really shouldn't. Integrity, only to violence. Courage, way too much. Definitely just 99% bravado. Gratitude, only to the bullets in his gun. Resilience, somehow he survives his mech blowing up multiple times over the course of a campaign. It's fine, they rebuild it 5 minutes later when they get ambushed a second time that day. How they do it so quick? Who knows? Maybe he's the secret. Maybe that's the real reason they're keeping him around. He just gets so pissed. He just, like, angrily gnaws the mechs back together like he's some sort of molten beaver. That's what I'm gonna go with. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue on. Alright, next up, let's see. So next up on the list is, I guess you would say, just the mercenary commander from Sword of Convaleria. Now, for the stubborn folks that say, that's not an SRPG, it's a gacha game. No, there is a gacha game attached to a very good single-player SRPG. Ignore the gacha crap. It is a very good game if you just play Spiral of Destinies. Anyway, so as far as their case, I'm going to say immediately flies up to S tier. Like, as far as As far as whether they'll be a good leader, let's go down the list. Self-awareness, they do seem very well aware of their role, and additionally, they seem to be very responsible as far as taking care of their job. Like, they're more or less inducted into their job as the mercenary leader, and immediately they're like, okay, I'm managing schedules, I'm managing where everybody's resting, I'm managing everyone's training, I'm managing getting new recruits into the place, managing dealing with medicines, dealing with internal crises. Like, they are on that shit immediately. As far as respect goes, it's very rare that they actually even slight somebody in conversation. Hell, like, one of the most memorable moments to me was on my first playthrough, in which you kind of have the option as to whether or not to spare a certain faction leader, and that guy had gotten in the way multiple times, and so I figured, screw it, this guy's going down, and they did the thing the Triangle strategy loves to do, that War of the Visions like to do, of like, oh no, look, you won the fight, but oh shoot, they're about to escape, and then they just come in from off screen, kick the guy to the ground, apologize, blow their face off with a fireball. I was like, you know what? At least they're respectful about it, but they still got the job done. So yeah, definitely doing that there. As far as compassion goes, they seem to go out of their way to care about people around, visit people on their sickbed. That's actually something that both Denim and Ramza did as well. Actually, one quick note I should mention, with Ramza, the reason that he's in A as opposed to S is because of his willingness to sacrifice people. So like A tier will be that case of your people are potentially either implied to be or directly expended by the end of the fight. So like in Ramza's case, you only ever see him and Alma ever coming out of that ghost ship. So the way that I read it is he saw that as a sort of victory by any means kind of situation, and the rest of his soldiers didn't make it. There's different readings of that scenario. We never get official confirmation, but we only ever see him and Alma ever actually survive. It could just be that those randos just kind of went their separate ways. You know, they were done with the mission after all, they went into hiding or whatever else. But the way that I see it, he rarely ever acknowledges the existence of his soldiers outside of sending them out on away missions, and usually gives them stuff like going and, you know, digging salvage out of the ocean or whatever else. He seems to see them as employees. For the ones that are going up in S, those are the ones that you regularly see interacting with all of their soldiers, checking up on them, all of that kind of thing. So, in this particular case, like when we're talking about the SOC leader here, we see regularly that they are checking in on people that were injured. They're checking in on the kind of status of everything going on in their town. Again, they're on the ball basically all the dang time. They're a bit of a busybody. As far as vision goes, they do seem to regularly have their nose in their paperwork and seem to constantly be sending out letters and kind of different agreements and whatever else to different people, and seem to generally kind of bite problems in the bud before they happen. So, like, for example, whenever there's like a looming food crisis and you find out about that, and you have options to, you know, start stockpiling money to be able to buy more, make agreements with people to go get more brought in, potentially try to find the source of the problem, whatever else. And all of those little kind of random little mini arcs are one of those reasons that I love SOC so much. But anyway, so yeah, as far as vision goes, they do seem to generally be clear about going and achieving their goals in that way, seem to be good about protecting their town through any means necessary. As far as communication goes, again, regularly see them sitting in on meetings, regularly see them meeting with leaders from all different groups, and trying to play all sides as much as possible. Learning agility, they basically immediately take over a mercenary company overnight, so again, immediately on the ball with almost no downtime there. Collaboration, constantly working with people, constantly trying to nurture more relationships. That is how you get more and more options in that game, is just like getting more and more people to the table, which is kind of difficult because a lot of them want to murder each other and oftentimes are directly at war with each other, and you're kind of like picking different sides to back in different things. Influence, they seem to have quite a bit of it, which is how you get to any of the endings anyway. It's why it's got some bad endings where you don't have enough influence to get there. Integrity, they do falter on this one a few times where they are potentially more willing to let certain things happen, but most of the better endings are kind of like sticking the course and not really giving into various different factions, as it were. Courage, generally, like, they always seem to kind of have their face out there. They don't directly participate in too many fights, which is interesting. And again, another one of those unique things that I really liked SOC for. It's rare that they actually directly get involved. Usually they're commanding from the background, and usually what ends up happening is, like, let's say there's an ambush, and immediately they'll be there going and protecting whoever they're supposed to be protecting. If there's, let's say, cases where somebody was about to escape and they see that their soldiers don't have it, they'll step in. Or let's say there's training missions where they'll have like some of their soldiers out in the background, but they'll be standing on top of, let's say, a cliff or a wall or whatever it happens to be, and shouting down commands at whoever they're assisting and training and whatever else. So as far as all that goes, they usually have their face out there, but they're not needlessly putting themselves at risk. Gratitude, they do seem to be thankful towards their people there, and if they are too tired, they will bench them for a while. And then resilience, like they do generally stick around. If they do get set on fire, they die on a couple of endings. So there's, you know, it turns out being set on fire, a little bit of a weakness. Anyway, moving on, quick sip of coffee. Alright, next up, with no shocker here as far as you are just a number, the XCOM commander. The one that is so potentially sociopathic that there's a pretty decent chance that they're actually an ethereal, courtesy of many fan theories. So why is this? Well, simply put, because they never negotiate with the enemy, they never look for any peaceful resolution. Their only collaboration is with the nations that fund them, and as soon as that funding dries up, they could not care less unless there happens to be somebody giving them something for going there. So they're very kind of hard-headed in terms of just doing exactly what they need to do, and every soldier is, functionally speaking, another $15. Anyways, so... Well, actually, I guess it depends on the difficulty that you chose, but moving on. As far as their characteristics, self-awareness, none. Respect, they get respected. Compassion, what's that? Vision, kill the aliens. 5, communication. Unless you're playing XCOM 2 and you get your communication arrays, what communication, aside from telling people exactly what to do? Learning agility, that one they definitely get. Advancing your technology, just like Xenonauts, is how you end up getting ahead. Collaboration, it's actually really funny because they really have no reason not to have joined with all of the other factions by the time XCOM 2 starts. Bradford already started those negotiations, but they'll only respect you after you kill some stuff with them. So kind of, I guess they kind of get that one. Influence, inexplicably high. Considering how they actually end up behaving most of those games. This is one of those things that led to those theories that this guy's an ethereal. Like, why does everybody respect somebody that lost the first war, also subjugated the entire Earth, and then had to be rescued? Like, where's their influence coming from? We couldn't find anybody better. There was some discussion over whether they were the only one that could use the commanding chair, and that's why they needed to find a cup holder for one of the Tactical Legacy Pack missions. It's weird. Anyway, there's a lot of intentionally unexplained stuff so that people can go wild with speculation. Integrity, nah, they just kind of boil aliens alive, basically. Courage disappears immediately as soon as the base is raided. Gratitude, they'll hand out medals. That's as much as you're getting. We might learn your name if you survive a week. Resilience, not very much. So yeah, that'll be about where that one goes. You're strictly just a number to them. Alright, next for will win, but maybe not you specifically. This is going to be Marsh from FFTA. It's not that he's necessarily a bad leader, but he definitely is kind of a bit of a downside to the people around him, because it's basically his way or the highway. There's no other options. Like, people keep telling him the entire game, like, look, dude, buddy, we know it's fake, but this is awesome. Like, we got everything that we ever wanted. Your brother can walk. You know, this guy over here got his parents back. You know, I finally get some friends. Could you maybe not, like, delete our cool alternate world? Like, no, Jumanji must die. Jumanji must die. So yeah, like, we'll win, but just maybe not you specifically is where I want to put him. So, self-awareness, he is aware of what he's doing. He is somewhat remorseful, but he knows he has to get it done. Ultimately, remember, he can't actually beat the final boss without actually convincing Mute's dad to more or less step up and be a dad. So, kind of one of those quiet, wholesome moments that doesn't really get remembered much about this game. But seriously, him getting his dad to kind of snap out of his funk, so to speak, is just really one of those things that makes that ending something special. Anyway. So yeah, as far as respect goes, definitely has a decent bit of that. Compassion, he does seem to genuinely care about all the problems that he comes across. So as far as that goes, yeah, he's got it covered. Vision, he is very narrow-mindedly focused on just destroying the alternate world. So he does have that, at least. You know, he doesn't really know where he's going to achieve that goal a lot of times, but he is constantly seeking that stuff out. Communication, he does try to talk to everybody, it's just that most of them completely disagree with him on a fundamental level. Learning agility, he does pick up the ropes pretty darn quick. Collaboration-wise, he does try to agree with everybody that happens to be around him, and once they realize that they can go back into the alternate world, presumably, that's when, for example, Ritz ends up joining the team, Barbas ends up joining the team, all that kind of thing. Come to think of it, Barbas. I wonder if Barbas is actually a reference to the other Barbas, because they do kind of have that whole dog face thing going on. Anyways, actually, come to think of it, they're both, like, kind of sagely sorts and whatnot, and also both seconds in command. Interesting. Anyway, well, not really seconds in command, more like tertiary. Whatever. Moving on. Influence does have quite a bit of that. Does have again, to a fault degree of integrity there. Courage definitely has that in spades. We don't really seem to have much of a meltdown in his case. Gratitude. He's thankful to Montblanc, at least unless he dies. Resilience, again, got plenty of that going for him as well. So he does meet the characteristics of a good leader, but personally I feel like, yeah, he'll end up winning. It's just you specifically might not like how it happens. Alright. Next up, in terms of the stubborn tier, actually, no, this is not stubborn tier. He's also going down into will win, but maybe not you specifically. Alphonse is fascinating in that he's kind of got the most loyalty ADD you'll ever see in anything. So, like, 5 seconds into the game, he's like, oh yeah, you know, Richter, best buddy, you know, we're gonna be through everything forever. So he gets shot, falls in the water, he meets Eleanor, he's like, oh shoot, pretty lady, I guess I'm just gonna go ahead and be loyal to you now. Ivana walks in, oh hey, other lady with a sword, okay, we're best buddies now. 5 seconds later he meets Richter again, hey look, we're best friends forever, he gave me money. Suddenly Richter doesn't show up to the fortress, well shoot, I guess I'm with Sybil now. I guess I kinda owe her one. So he meets with Richter, he's like, hold on, you gave me money, she saved life. Life worth more than money. Sybil, my best friend now. Friendship with Richter ended. So he ends up going down that particular route, and it's just like, no matter who he runs into, he just suddenly has loyalty ADD, which is why I love the B route, where he's just suddenly throwing all of his chips behind Eleanor. He's like, hold on, that lady saved life. That man give me money. Wait, this lady wants to do funky things while naked. Okay, well, we have a winner. Anyway, I know that's not directly how it's said, but through all their trauma bonding and whatever else, you know, it probably crossed his mind. Anyway, so that being said, as far as leadership qualities go, let's see. Self-awareness, I feel like he's almost comically not self-aware. Again, he's constantly wrestling in his own head as far as who he should go follow. As far as respect goes, the way that he absolutely shuts down Richter is like one of those moments that really sticks out as extremely disrespectful. Like, yeah, that lady saved you, but also she's a spy and trying to use you and maybe at least explain the situation a little bit. As far as compassion goes, well, he doesn't seem compassionate towards the mermaids. He does seem compassionate towards Eleanor. And generally speaking, definitely doesn't show much compassion towards everybody else, so I guess he's just compassionate towards the ladies or something. I don't know. Let's see, as far as vision is concerned, he's very short-sighted in most situations that he runs across. Communication-wise, there's multiple cases where he could have just said a bit more and possibly fixed his situation, as it were. So, for example, like when he washes up on the beach, he doesn't really explain too much of their situation aside from their general goal. That's fine. He runs into Richter, doesn't explain what they're doing. He talks to Sybil. He just keeps it basically using her as his therapist instead of explaining his real problems. He gets the mermaids. He vaguely tries to kind of say that they're there for peace or whatnot else, but like at no point does he put away his weapon and be like, look, guys, I get it, you want to fight. Can I help you? Like, we're not with these guys. Just, I will help you with those guys if you help us out right now, but, you know, first mermaid ends up running away. He runs into Ariel later. They kind of start talking. He says that he wants peace. She only hears that he wants pizza made out of mermaids. And fair enough. So he does at least get the full story from those mermaids later. He does spend a lot of the mid-game going and meeting with people and communicating with them reasonably well. As far as learning agility goes, does he actually pick up too much very quickly? I feel like he's decently adaptable. We're going to say learning agility is probably a check. Collaboration. he'll join with anybody that happens to pop his way. Again, loyalty ADD on that particular one. Like, it is very funny that if you pick up Arbitration as well as Go Beast Tamer, right at the very start of the game, you can have near guaranteed odds of guaranteeing a Griffin, or recruiting a Griffin, meaning that the first Griffins you come across, you can just recruit an entire team, and then you can collaborate with the wildlife. Anyway, so let's see, influence. He seems to have relatively little influence considering his position. Like, militarily, he seems pretty strong towards the mid to late game. Influence-wise, not really so much. Like, nobody really seems to respect him for most of it. Integrity will be all over the place. He seems to mostly just be reacting to stuff around him. Integrity-wise, he seems to be a little bit self-centered in a lot of cases. Like, if, let's say, you go down one of the routes that Eleanor ends up sacrificing herself to go deal with Shaher, he doesn't necessarily try to step in. He's just kind of observing that situation and seeing how it plays out. As far as whether it ends up being Sybil that ends up doing that, he doesn't necessarily try to stop it. Like, they just killed this demigod. Surely they can just kill it again. So he doesn't really try to stop any of them. He doesn't really question the whole, like, well, I gotta bring one of you as my pet buddy to the afterlife forever. Just doesn't really seem to question that very much. As far as killing off the mermaids, he does have a kind of pang of guilt there, but he doesn't directly say no to the entire planet at any point there. But again, part of that is he is kind of from Lotus there. He has his specific orders. He is supposed to do a specific job, so there might not be a lot of wiggle room there. Courageousness has that on unlocked for the most part. Gratitude, he seems to at least get along with people. And resilience, by the end of it, he's probably got a fire crest. It's hard to get more resilient than that. Alright, let's see. Let's go ahead and move on here. So next, for your odds are better on a landmine, we are going to have Adele over from Disgaea 2. Why? Because frankly, of anyone else on this list, there's very few that are going to wind up just kind of accidentally committing so many crimes that they cannibalize the entire party. I'm not kidding. I don't know why that game has that ending. It's weirdly dark. The whole thing is so happy and whimsical, and then just one of the endings like, well, I guess the main character ate his wife, and then just everybody else, whoopsie, they ate children. What the fuck is that ending? It's bizarre. I wouldn't recommend even trying to get it because it takes a really long time to get that ending. Just look it up. It's weird, man. It is super weird. It's not like there aren't dark implications to the Disgaea games, but what is that? Anyway. So let's see, next for the mission we'll get done at any cost thing, we'll go ahead and move on to the Kingsbane War Crime Gumby, aka the Wisp Slayer. So we're not necessarily going to go down the entire list for a lot of the rest of these, with two exceptions, because a lot of them are just here because I thought they were interesting to put on the list. So in his case, he's going to be essentially a squad leader that does take the time to go talk with everybody. So we've got the compassion, we've got the communication on lock there. As far as learning agility, they are fully willing to go into the place with no resources and no backup and just sort of figure it out, and they do anyway. Let's see, as far as self-awareness, they are very well aware of the limited budget that they were sent in there with, the limited resources they were sent in there with, and they're fully willing to comply and respect their superiors to make that happen, even if it's practically a suicide mission. Funnily enough, that is a challenge run I plan to do at some point to see if you can make it with just the leader and the wyvern. Somebody told me that there's a mod for that, and I really want to try it. As far as vision goes, they are pretty clear about picking out objectives as far as how to break down the wisps and their command structure in order to get to the ones that you actually have to kill off, so they got that covered. As far as resilience goes, they are literally made of stone. Gratitude, they seem thankful for their friends showing up, though there is the option to send them away, and they do make the time to go and check up on them every time that you have a camp scene, so they are going to check up on everybody, and you can get through the entire game without taking any casualties whatsoever. Actually, funnily enough, one of the speedruns does this. But yeah, so I would say they probably go into the mission will get done at any cost, because frankly, with most of the fights, you wind up with at least half your team or more on the ground, so they won't necessarily want to carry you through the fire on their back. If the Wyvern was the leader, then they absolutely would be going up into S tier, but we're talking about the Wisp Slayer specifically, so they get to go up in A. Alright, next, for the, well, will win, but maybe not you specifically tier, we're putting Ike from Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. Now, it's been a long time since I played Path of Radiance, so I'm probably misremembering some stuff. Like, I vaguely remember something about a Dark Knight, something about him and his dad being mercenaries and doing the typical Fire Emblem kind of deal. But in his particular case, I say will win, maybe not you specifically, because they're more of an inspirational leader. They can fight good, they can go and try to survive real good and inspire people to fight with them, but as far as actual leadership and stuff like that, I don't recall them doing very much actual direct leading outside of fighting things. Not to mention, if anything were to happen, they don't really have much of a command structure to fall back on, which actually, that's one of two questions that I really want to wrap up this list on, which is, do they actually have anybody else that can take over if anything happens to them? Like, do they have some redundancy in their system? And also, how often do they try to talk themselves out of problems rather than talking themselves into one? Because that was one of those conversations that Vale and I had years ago when Triangle Strategy came out, as far as one of the big frustrations of being a Tactics Ogre player going into Triangle Strategy. But anyway, so as far as Ike goes, I feel like they would probably go about here. Self-awareness-wise, I remember them pretty much being aware of their whole situation. Respectfulness-wise, I remember them wanting to fight things a decent bit. Compassion-wise, I mean, they do recruit enemy units to their team, so sure. Vision-wise, not sure about that one. Communication-wise, I don't recall them talking as much as they could have. Learning agility, probably. He does pick up his job on the fly. Collaboration-wise, does take on enemy units. Influence-wise, I remember them having a pretty decent amount of reputation there. And, you know, we got the whole integrity, influence, all that kind of thing covered. But I feel like in most cases, his soldiers would be, given that it is a Fire Emblem game, would be more willing to sacrifice themselves to save their king, so to speak, basically because the movement falls apart if something happens to him. So I'm going to go ahead and say will win, but maybe not you specifically for him. Then from there, we get our next stubborn contender, which is going to be Kyrie from Felseal. Now, in her case, she's basically a roving police precinct captain, more or less. So what's going on there is that they don't necessarily have the option to back down, but there are cases when they could have let things go in order to resolve things peacefully, and they don't. Granted, that's so the game can happen, but still. So as far as self-awareness, they do seem aware of their position. As far as respect goes, they're respectful towards anybody that's on the quote-unquote good guy side of things, but like anybody else, they're immediately trying to assert dominance. So there is a little bit of a question there over how much of that was truly necessary. Compassion-wise, they're not the most compassionate person. Like, they will check in on a few of their people and whatnot. They will stop by camp to go check on their NPCs, to go check on how their kind of sub-commanders and stuff are doing. As far as their, like, anybody else that they're running across, they have very strong, like, give me a reason to arrest you energy in a lot of cutscenes. So I would say compassion-wise, they don't come across as compassionate, but it's there. Vision-wise, they only have a vague goal during most of what they're trying to do. So they're just kind of trying to complete their journey and trying to catch the person that they initially started off the game catching, because they are trying to arrest a handful of people who keep getting sprung out of magical griffin jail. Communication-wise, they talk to their people, they talk through their problems. As far as their enemies are concerned, there's moments that they really could have communicated better. The immediate one that comes to mind is about, like, 3 hours into the game, where you got that one bandit leader who's basically saying, okay, look, you guys can pass by without a fight, we have you surrounded, and she's like, hold on, you just admitted to banditry, we have to arrest every single person in this forest. It's like, look, you're in a bad position right now, just let it go. Let it go, come back to this later with backup. Don't do that right now. So yeah, learning agility, they do seem to pick up the ropes of their kind of new powers and stuff like that pretty quick. You know, just like any FFT, like, they learn their skills pretty quickly, and additionally they get a lot of mechanics that they learn relatively quickly. I would say they got that relatively covered. Collaboration. On this one, we got to talk about camp structure, because obviously that's going to be different in every one of these games. But as far as seeing that they actually have some logistics covered, I will say it's like Kyrie Magnus, the sort of Convaleria mercenary. in those particular cases, you see that they have logistics that they're paying attention to all the time. So like in her case, you see that the camp has a particular schedule that they keep to. You see that your favorite units are usually the ones serving as bodyguards to your main characters, and then you've got other people patrolling around the camp. You've got the chefs rotating out. You've got people going and kind of scouting the local regions off in the background of cutscenes and stuff like that. So we do know that they keep a schedule pretty darn well. As far as influence goes, it's not exactly outside of what they would normally have. Again, basically roving police precinct, so they've kind of got that local sheriff energy, I guess you could say. Integrity, again, almost to a fault. It is potentially one of the bad endings that can happen to that game if they stick too much to that. Courage is covered. Gratitude, they seem to generally be thankful. And resilience-wise, again, seems to avoid having any mental breakdowns over the course of their journey, so I'd say they got that covered. Alright. Next, as far as the mission will get done at any cost, we've got Ash from Vandal Hearts. This is also one that I played so dang long ago that it's really hard to remember the finer details, but the wiki told me some things and I remembered some things. So generally speaking, they take no casualties over the course of the whole thing, but they do seem to cause a generally large amount of collateral damage and gore everywhere they go. So the mission will get done, you just might get turned into a blood geyser. So they lose none of their own people, but they're potentially excessively brutal towards the enemy squads there, and they do offer people the chance to kind of stand down wherever they were. They're functionally a sword cop like a couple of others on this list. Self-awareness wise, they again seem to be aware of their position. Respect wise, they don't really respect many of the people above them because they're making bad decisions, which rate that as you will. Compassion wise, if you're on the opposite side, not so much. Vision wise, I don't recall them having a plan for a lot of it. A lot of the plot just sort of seemed to happen as far as I recall. There might have been more to it. Again, it's been like 10 years. So, give me a minute on that. The last I played it was, like 3,000 miles away on a PSP, going and visiting a relative on the other end of the country, and it was just a fun weekend blazing through that thing. So again, not going to remember all the finer details. I didn't get like the Vandalier class or any of that. But anyways, so communication-wise, he's not really too much of a talker. Learning agility, he does seem to pick up the ropes of where he is pretty quickly. Collaboration-wise, I think he mostly just sort of picks up stragglers along the way and hopes for the best. Influence-wise, I don't recall him having much of that. They're just kind of traveling along and doing missions, as it were. So, I would say they're more of a direct fighter sort, but yeah, the mission will get done at any cost. It's just, he's good at protecting his own people, not so much at protecting the others. Next for, well, let's see. Where do we want to put Luzo? Like, do we kind of put him towards stubborn, or do we just put him like will win, maybe not you specifically here? Because like, as far as Luso is concerned, he's interesting in that he's the most delegatory of everybody on this list. Like, I feel like he almost would be his own category here, because he will gladly farm out almost any mission in the game to any of the generics in his team, which actually gives you different dialogues, which is one of those fun little replayability features of that game. But yeah, it's just cool to see these little rivalries forming, and then you suddenly show up and your leader was just too busy that day to even show up, so he just went and sent like the bishop in his place or something like that. So it's just cool to see the alternate dialogue. Anyway, so in his case, he will delegate almost anything out to anyone. He does pick up things relatively quickly. So self-awareness, he is self-aware that he's not necessarily very good at what he does. He's just got a lot of gusto. Respect, he can't really control his mouth in a lot of cases, but he does seem to try to respect people. Like, he seems to respect Sid and almost any other leader type that he runs into, but as soon as there's somebody he doesn't like, he just can't stop running his mouth, so maybe not necessarily much there. For compassion, he seems to care about people around, like especially you see cases like with Fermelda there. I think that was the Sword Master lady's name. That always kind of reminded me of that lady from Shrek. Anyways. Partially that was the whole swamp thing and the whole transformation thing. Anyway, so yeah, compassion-wise, they probably got that covered. Vision, not really. I mean, his vision is exclusively whatever his journal tells him to do. Communication, hilariously bad at it. Dude just rambles. He's like me. Learning agility. He does pick things up relatively quick, and immediately can pick up a sword and learn new skills with it. So, you know, FFTA logic and such. Collaboration. He does work with almost everybody that he comes across, so that's good. Actually, one more thing I probably should point out, that we're actually going to put Marsh one stage lower down to you are just a number. What the hell does he say to make every single unit run away crying? What is he saying to these people? You got like hardened warrior lizards that are showing up as like knightly defenders and stuff like that, and they're running away crying. What does this child say to destroy their confidence that much? They just asked to join your club. The worst you can say is no. Marsh, what did you do? Anyway, so yeah, as far as courage, gratitude, whatever else, he's a bit childish in that particular respect, so not necessarily gratitude all the time. It's like a 50-50 on that. Integrity is just kind of whatever he says that day. Influence, he doesn't really have much. The clan really has most of the influence there. So it's really more about the clan than him for FFTA, so, or FFTA 2 rather. So I'm going to say, like, we'll win, but maybe not you specifically, and that you being Luso in this case. I feel like, honestly, the game could function just fine without him. So there's that. And then we get to a couple of the most interesting cases on this list. Both of them are going to be S tiers, but it's just fascinating. Okay, so first we have Elaine from Unicorn Overlord, the guy who took fuck your enemies way too seriously. So in his case, in his particular case, he's somebody that will be rebuilding infrastructure everywhere he goes. He generally does a good job of trying to negotiate down whatever problems he runs into, and generally seems to try to get along with every faction along the way, usually trying to take the role of a kind of middle ground peacekeeper, and will also go out of their way to try to solve problems by putting themselves at risk, like for example with the whole lion and not lion, but the bear and wolf scenario, where there's two factions, both of you ask to kill the other, and you can basically take on the agreements on both, fight them both, and drag them both kicking and screaming to the negotiation table, which is good. So that generally shows that they've got a bit more kind of, they've got a kind of higher level understanding of the political situation that's there. What's interesting is that throughout the entirety of Unicorn Overlord, trying not to spoil things here, but to an extent, he's given a free pass on a lot of the stuff that he tries to do. So like all the rebuilding things, like there's no counterattacking. So when it comes to rebuilding things, he just gets a free pass there. When it comes to getting new regions, it's easier than it maybe otherwise would be if there was pushback, and it's unclear how his strategy would work if there was more pushback. Because as far as enemies are concerned, as soon as the local leader's gone, they're gone for good. Nobody really comes back to take back those areas, and we do find out why later, but it is interesting to see, like, would he kind of go down the denim route? If there was more counterattacking, if there was more loss of his territories, would he potentially be a bit more dark in what he tries to do? But we do see a darker side potentially being possible from the fact that almost every recruit also has the option to be executed instead. So he's not necessarily unwilling to handle that stuff and even handle it himself. So we say that there is that kind of backbone there to make stuff happen. So as far as self-awareness goes, he does seem to be aware that he is potentially in a more precarious position than he possibly should be, but he's also kind of being allowed to get away with it. As far as respect goes, he's like permanently respectful to everybody. Compassion, I mean, you can probably get rid of the first first three letters there, when immediately a good bit of the NPC interactions are like, hey, so I know we're fighting, but how's it going? You know? So yeah, he's got the option to basically get busy with just about any NPC in the game, which is really funny in a lot of cases. Now, that being said, again, like, it kind of works because of the scenario here, and the devs even said, like, that was kind of intentional, of just, like, let everybody have a sort of good vibes SRPG that's actually well made. So yeah, I will say for Compassion, they generally will... Most players, I feel, would go down that route. Like, I'm pretty sure most didn't immediately distrust Melisandre and just, like, execute them on the spot. That's not the sword they were looking to take, Elaine. Anyway, so yeah. Personally, I thought that there was going to be more backstabbing. Like, my first playthrough, again, coming from the tactics ogre side of things, I'm like, okay, don't trust you, don't trust you, don't trust you, only to find out later, like, yeah, there's actually a bunch of really heartwarming stuff that we sort of executed in cold blood over there. Whoopsie! Moving on. As far as Vision's concerned, they're pretty clear-sighted about stuff from start to finish. Communication, they're constantly, again, taking meetings, meeting with people, whatever else. Learning agility, they pick up the ropes quick, they pick up new mechanics pretty quick, and like generally are just kind of quick on the draw on most things. Collaboration, they eventually get the entire continent together, well, countries, larger, multiple continents, whatever, they get all of it together. Influence, a crazy amount of it. Their reputation precedes them basically everywhere they go. Integrity, they almost never seem to falter in that particular one. Like, they have a few moments that it may seem a little darker, but primarily that's if you try to speedrun the game. Got courage covered, gratitude, they always seem to thank everybody, and resilience, again, we don't really see them have much of a breakdown, even during mind control attempts and stuff like that. Like, the one time that it almost happens on the kind of best route, they just sort of just end up passing out and having just a complete blue screen. So there's that. I would say probably S tier in that particular regard. It is, again, up in the air as to whether they might go a different route, if and when there happened to be a situation that they were tested a bit more militarily. And then next, who I'm actually going to go ahead and put, I'm going to say between Sorticon Valeria and between Unicorn Overlord. Lastly, we've got Serenoa, aka the Stark Boy, from Triangle Strategy. His case is interesting, because he probably goes... He goes through one of the biggest kind of maturation arcs throughout most of these games here. And you'll notice also there's a few that we actually left off this list. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but for example, like Destin and Europia from March of the Black Queen didn't end up getting mentioned because they're kind of a blank slate. There's not really much going on there. We had a couple of other ones, like we could have potentially put in like Snake from Metal Gear Acid, but he's basically an amnesiac trying to figure out what the hell's going on most of the time, so I don't know how much leadering they're actually doing. There's a lot of ones out here, so these were just the ones that I thought were the most interesting. But Serenoa's case was the one that actually kind of got me started on this particular mental rabbit hole, because in his case, he generally starts off as a bit of a naive, kind of awful leader at the very start, and the golden route only happens once he actually realizes what all of this stuff was all about to begin with. He basically becomes Denim for the golden route, which is, again, fascinating to me personally. Because while I don't think that the actual plot was handled particularly well, the arc itself is an interesting one. So, at the very beginning, he's being married off to someone he basically doesn't really understand more than this is just what his job is supposed to be, and pretty much immediately the war breaks out, so he's utterly unprepared as far as how to do anything other than fight things. He's got a few retainers, all of which have more experience than he does, and are trying to kind of nudge him in the right direction. Now, this mechanic, I feel, would have been so much better if you could not convince them directly to switch their votes at any given time. If there was, like, I hope whenever they do make a Triangle Strategy 2, I hope you have less direct influence over how you change things. Like, for example, in SOC's case, you do have a similar type thing where a lot of times you're kind of railroaded in your plot depending on choices that you made, but a lot of times it's like 50% the stuff you did during a fight. Like, did you manage to spare those civilians while trying to take out the rioters? Like, did you just take out the riot leaders, or did you just go in and steamroll everything? Or, you know, depending on certain decisions that you made on whether you used certain resources, whether you let the town run out of food or potentially accepted in cultists, you know, just kind of whatever it happened to be. And in Triangle's case, the way that it seemed to be structured was that, like, depending on how much you value collecting items during fights, or how much you value collecting money, like, your influence score changes if, let's say, you run around the capital and collect all of the money and dinner plates and whatever else, and it's only ever a positive. And I feel like if it had more of a negative, it would have had so much impact to be like, hey, look, certain people are just not going to join you because you looted the palace you were just saving. It always kind of felt weird to me that there wasn't more pushback. That pushback was so badly needed there. Anyway, sorry, getting off track. So, as far as Triangle went, though, he starts off kind of naive, and generally generally doesn't seem to have much of an idea what's going on. He meets his pyromancer wife, and he's all happy with this arrangement. He goes and he meets out with all the kind of various leaders and whatnot, and they pretty much immediately tell him to his face, like we could make you kneel right now, if we felt like it. And even in those particular cases, it felt like he was basically just being put in his place and whatnot. Immediately when the war breaks out, his choices end up kind of leaning towards keeping his friends safe or keeping his people safe and whatnot. Though it is kind of funny how, like, I know I criticize this endlessly about Triangle, that, like, even if you decide to keep your friends safe and keep your people safe and whatever else, there's, like, no downsides. It's like, oh, your army died, whoopsie, just immediately back next week. They recruit quickly around there. But anyways, besides the point. So they're put through a series of different ringers over essentially being taken on by various different factions, made to fight their allies and whatever else. I feel like there would have been a lot more interesting stuff if they had been given the option to, like, let's say, go and talk to the pink folks directly, explain their plan directly instead of being super vague about it, not explaining it, letting people die, and then finally explaining their plot like 13 hours later. But let's see. As far as self-awareness, he seems to mostly be aware of his limited power at the very start of it, but is repeatedly propped up by his advisors to kind of think more highly of himself than he really does. Whether or not that's a good thing is potentially up for a question. As far as respect, he's generally respectful towards everybody around him. As far as compassion goes, I mean, yeah, that is kind of a given, though, because you can really obviously tell who the bad guys are. It's like, are they smiling in their portrait? Great, they're not only a friend, they'll probably join your team. Are they snarling and have a shadow over their face? Oh boy, that might be a bad guy. But I'm going to say compassion-wise, they probably get the vote on that one. They try to do the right thing by their wife, one of those kind of good touching moments of that one. It's good to see, like, a couple actually acting like a couple in a game for once. Generally speaking, there's always this kind of unease and hoping that you're not going and ruining something and whatever else. Alright, and let's see. Vision, they're kind of just going with whatever their advisors say in a lot of cases, so it's unclear how much vision they have themselves, but collectively speaking, they're kind of collecting bits and pieces from people around them, so I would say they are trying to form a vision, they just don't have the capacity to do it just yet for a good chunk of the game there. Communication-wise, they try to talk to everybody, but that's also one of those really frustrating, like, downfalls, where it's just like, dude, just explain to the pinks what your plan is. You're using them as spies. Just tell them, this is happening. You are getting taken over whether we do it or they do it or whatever else. But instead they sit there like, guys, actually, it reminded me of that one bit from South Park, where it's just like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, transitions again. We're so sorry. We're so sorry. We're so sorry. We're so sorry. And then, like, someone gets shot in the background. We're still so sorry. The same thing happens anyway. And we're so sorry. Someone else dies. And we're so sorry. That bit was so frustrating to me. I cannot even put that in words. But yeah, he tends to spend a lot of time kind of backing down and apologizing and not actually carrying through on his threats. So on communication, I would say kind of falters for a huge chunk of it. He does have those moments where he does eventually kind of do the right thing there, but his initial response is one of nervousness and kind of falling apart communication-wise. Learning agility, though, that's kind of the interesting one, and one of the reasons that I picked this particular list. Because over the course of the whole thing, you do see him kind of gain that confidence to actually go and properly speak up on time, actually get to the point on time. And the golden route is more or less like, okay, we're done with voting. I don't need everybody's advice anymore. I can finally go and make these decisions myself. This voting has helped us out to some degree. It's been a decent guiding mark to get us to where we are, but I got this. And that ability to go and, learn stuff is definitely one of the solid moments. I wish that the other endings were a bit less awkward as a result, because you can kind of feel that they were a little bit rushed compared to the other ones. Like, good lord, that pink route ending is just... Oh, it's funny. Anyway, like, oh, what's your plan? We're gonna invade them, we're gonna just, like, jailbreak a bunch of people, and, we're just gonna, like, nuke a port, and just hope that we find a nuke there. It's gonna be fine, we'll just find one. Do you know how to use one? No, but I'm hoping we'll find the instruction manual. Okay, great plan. Let's see, collaboration. They do try to get along with every faction in the game there. Influence-wise, they do have a very large amount of influence courtesy of their dad. Integrity-wise, they try. It's funny because they, again, don't really get a chance to see this tested, because even when they do say they'll do unfortunate things, they never actually do. Courage-wise, that's actually another one of those interesting angles, because they are clearly nervous in most situations, but do eventually get past it, which is definitely a bigger sign of courage than just going for it directly. Gratitude-wise, I'm going to say that's a maybe. They do make a good point to go and thank people when a plan works out, so that's good. And then resilience-wise, they have some faltering moments, but for the most part, they're fairly resilient in that particular regard. So, I will say that's kind of roughly where this list ends up. This is long, like twice as long as I originally intended this thing to be, but I feel roughly speaking, this is where we land with this list here. But yeah, as far as the S tier goes, like bottom of S tier there with Elaine, pays attention to logistics, checks up on people, makes sure that everything's running well, leaves people in charge. So we've got delegation happening, tries to talk down enemies. So generally speaking, I feel like they do that job particularly well. They just weren't necessarily as directly tested by counterattacks. In the case of Serenoa there, he comes off as very inexperienced early on, generally ends up eventually living up to his role by the end of it, tries to take the advice of his people as much as he can. That inexperience eventually sheds off. Does come off as a little corny in some cases, and just like frustratingly refuses to talk up earlier on, but again, really good portrayal of inexperience in that particular regard. But yeah, I wish his advisors would at least say something in those cases. It almost feels like they're scared of him. But yeah, I will say they definitely do that job well. They're lacking a bit in logistics, but other people sort of handle that for them. So they do have a little bit of a crutch in terms of other people handling certain things for them, and he doesn't step on their toes while doing so, so that's good. In the case of the SOC leader, they just sort of step in and immediately are just assisting everybody in doing their jobs better, so pretty much solid across the board. They have a few moments where they don't talk when they probably should. Though, again, some of those moments do end up working out reasonably well, just due to the fact that eventually there's more reflection that happens there. It likes to have those moments of reflection, of like looking back, of people coming back to that conversation, like, look, I know we didn't say anything right here, you know, thanks for not correcting me on this particular thing. You know, I just noticed over there, maybe that was kind of a dumb idea, had a bit of a minute to think about it. So it's a scene you don't actually see in games that often. I kind of appreciate that. So I will say in general, like as far as management, as far as kind of operating their team, operating logistics, trying to talk people down, trying to play all sides and whatever else, they definitely handle that. Like they're a bit of a step up from the previous two in terms of playing the political game, and that they try to ingratiate themselves with everybody. And then finally, we got Denim on the end there, which I will say immediately, I know there's going to be comments of bias on that particular one, but again, we see them like spending all their damn time in meetings. They are constantly checking up on people, checking up on companions, checking up on people that were missing, following up on rumors that they heard, following up on any tools that they could use. Like they just hear a rumor of a pirate that's going around and beating people. It's like, hold on, this man sounds like a good soldier. He hears that there is pumpkins going and harassing a ghetto. He's like, hold on, I need to protect that border. I need to go make sure that this isn't a problem. Finds the source of the pumpkins, ends up going to investigate that whole thing. Hold on, there's zombies over here. Like, we screwed up this town earlier. We need to clean up our own mess. Follows up, hey, look, we made these zombies. We gotta clean them up. You know, goes deals with that situation. Like, they seem to be on the ball as far as trying to manage all of the affairs of their island as much as they can. You know. So I feel like of everybody on the list, they're probably the most on it as far as directly addressing everything, but we also see that with Ramza as well. However, in his particular case, he doesn't have the option to answer every problem directly, so he just has to kind of like go for the head of the snake, so to speak. It's like Ramza doesn't necessarily have an army, he doesn't have a nation backing him, he doesn't have multiple nations that he's taken over. So he doesn't necessarily have the resources to be even able to do what the ones on the S tier are doing. So there is that element as well, that some people just got screwed by setting, more or less. Like in Denim's particular case, again, like they have one army and they're essentially using it to go and subdue other armies, convincing other people to switch sides, trying to take as few casualties as possible along the way, trying to save their people as much as possible in every situation. So either way, I feel that more or less covers it. So let me know what you guys think. It was a bit of a long ramble, and I really got to get going. So y'all take care. Have a good one. Bye.